Song Miao is both seductive and ruthless. Xing Shao, ruthless and not deadly. He hates her, so much so that he wants to melt her into his own flesh and blood. 18 years old, he said, Song Miao's kind of trash, I'm just playing with her. The passionate girl who overturned him heard his hatred fall into a cold pond. She left with a heart as dead as ashes. It also took away Xing Shao's heart. At the age of 26, the girl produced the coldest and most stunning black rose, with sharp thorns all over her body. She said, Master Xing, I hate you more than you think. Xing Shao knelt devoutly in front of her, holding her hand to his forehead and saying, AMU, I apologize. Young heart is only for you, just for you. Cold-hearted and heartless fairy plus infatuated and unrestrained crazy criticism. Lang Mei Ci's or Ran plus paranoid loyal dog tycoon. True fairy plus false wanderer. Keywords of the novel. Only allow to kiss me without pop-ups, only allow to kiss me. Download the entire TXT collection, only allow to kiss me. Read the latest chapters. Chapter 1. She, not worth, seeking recommendation ticket. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. She, not worth, seeking recommendation ticket, Song Miao, they are popular celebrities. Why do you write lyrics and compose music for them? What's wrong with giving them your reputation with money? Is there a problem? The person in charge of Indu Studio, Lu Yin, hated the girl with a seductive expression in front of her, who couldn't stand it. I'm not saying it. Just those troublemakers in your family, even if you're famous, what's going on? Black material is crushing you, hurry up, pack up and go see the agent over there with me. Old woman, I can't say it anymore. Song Miao stubbornly refused, with a hint of impatience on his seductive little face and a hint of resentment in his raised fox eyes. If you don't go, you have to go. Lu Yin slapped the keys of the piano, and the electronic keyboard made a piercing noise. You can't do this for no reason. If this order is destroyed, where else can we, Indu, have the money to support you? Lu Yin stopped speaking, took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and spoke softly, You don't know what's going on with Indu. You also know the virtues of those people under your command. If you don't agree today, let them get out of here. The three people lying outside the recording studio eavesdropping trembled, exchanged glances, and lowered their heads. Song Miao frowned. Lose to her. Tianting Hotel. Lu Yin took Song Miao's arm and happily depicted a beautiful future for her. Song Miao felt the hotel lights glaring and raised her hand to press down on the black brim of her hat, covering her lifeless eyes. The dark golden private door was pushed open. Lu Yin smiled and pushed Song Miao into the private room, shouting with a smile, Sister Zhou, you've been waiting for a long time. There's a bit of traffic on the way, and you're late. My sister will apologize for it. She grabbed the middle-aged woman's hand and approached her, saying something to make her laugh before introducing her. This is Song Miao, the muse who wrote the lyrics with a sullen expression before. The middle-aged woman glanced at Song Miao, her eyes slightly dull, and looked at him again with a hint of meaning. This condition is good, and it's also quite popular in the entertainment industry. Miss Zhou, you are really a ridiculous compliment. Lu Yin smiled and pulled Song Miao to sit down, scanning around her with a flattering smile. I heard that Yin Yin's upper drama won another prize. This time, she will enter the music industry again. It's definitely the next day, when the time comes. Her words were spoken to the point where everyone who understood them. Song Miao instinctively nodded in agreement. Lu Yin is sociable and much stronger than her. They met on the streets of a foreign country, and at that time she fell into the trap of singing on the subway. She was the most generous guest and also the bastard who smashed her stall. So, when she mentioned that she needed lyricists for a music studio, she agreed to return to her home country. I just didn't expect that their partner wasn't much better either, and now they have fallen into the role of being gunmen for others. Fate is so unfair. For example, evil people live 1,000 times better than her. When the man in a suit and leather shoes entered the room holding the delicate beauty, his eyes only stayed on her for less than a second before moving away. "Mr. Xing, if you don't inform us in advance of your visit, I will immediately have someone changed to the largest private room." Lu Yin smiled and hurriedly walked out, preparing to use her meager savings to exchange a private room that matched his status for the heavenly god who came to visit. Is this a musician prepared for Yin Yin? Xing Shao's sharp gaze swept over Song Miao's pale yet almost demon-like little face, and his narrow eyes were covered with a hint of coldness. Just her. Disdainful tone. Yes, yes, yes. Lu Yin continued to smile. She is the muse who filled out the song Lonely Hero for Chen Chen before, and is the #1 in our studio. Please rest assured, Mr. Xing. Change people. Xing Shao interrupted her coldly, she doesn't deserve it. Lu Yin was stunned, her red lips parted and she didn't utter a single syllable. Song Miao looked at the arrogant and old-fashioned man across from him, his expression unchanged. His tongue slid over his slightly dry lips, with a hint of crimson tint. His low and hoarse voice drifted out, she doesn't deserve it. The new book is out for the first time, welcome to collect it, keep reading more, please don't keep reading. I update it on time, please. Regarding updates. Stable daily at midnight for 4,000, ensuring that babies can see it when they wake up. Other. 1. Breaking the mirror and reuniting, the male and female protagonists are clean and don't want anything. Loyal male protagonists, he just doesn't understand love, forgive him. 2. I hope children with recommended votes can vote. Thank you for your support. 3. May everyone be brave enough to fulfill their wishes. Please ask for comments from the lovely ones. I just want to chat with people, my dear ones. Be more active and leave more comments. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. How dare you come back seeking recommended tickets? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. How dare you come back seeking recommended tickets? Song Miao stood up to leave. Lu Yin quickly grabbed her wrist, glared at her, and then turned to apologize to Xing Shao with a smile. Mr. Xing, I'm sorry, she has such a bad temper. I'll apologize on her behalf. Can you think about it again? The pretty girl also pulled his sleeve and coquettishly said in a low voice, Shao, it's just her, okay? Her extremely thin voice, with a gentle twist at the end, was afraid that others wouldn't know she was his woman. Miss Han Yin's voice is only 2 points softer than a duck's, I'm afraid she can't move Mr. Xing. Song Miao smiled lightly and sarcastically, besides. Her face was more sarcastic, and her voice was filled with contempt. My line skills are only at a few, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 level. I'm afraid I can't even remember the lyrics, she said as she finished speaking. She flicked away Lu Yin's hand and turned to walk outside. Song Miao. Stop me. Lu Yin couldn't help but smile and angrily rebuked, come and apologize. Song Miao threw her a back image directly. Lu Yin was stunned and quickly bowed to Xing Shao to apologize. I'm sorry, Mr. Xing, I'm sorry. Hotel rooftop. Song Miao sat smoking on the platform outside the railing, with a towering building at his feet. A little carelessness will turn her into a mess of mud. The summer wind blew the smoke from her pale fingertips, and a single cigarette burned out like this. Woo 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 woo. The vibrating phone in her pocket pulled back her drifting thoughts. She hooked over the cigarette box and took out a cigarette, lowered her head to pick it up, lit it, and the smoke shrouded her seductive little face, hiding a sense of desolation in her eyes. She answered the phone. Hey, the hoarse voice emitted a single note that seemed to take away all her strength. Where did you die? Lu Yin shouted on the other end of the phone, furious. Hang up. She moved her phone to prepare to hang up. Ancestor, I beg you, can you count me as I beg you? Stop that big shot and apologize, otherwise how will you get into the circle in the future? Don't mix up. Song Miao refused and hung up the phone. She shared half a cigarette with the wind and sat on the rooftop until it was dark before leaving. Her residential area in Jincheng is considered the last batch of old neighborhoods that have not been demolished. The induction lights in the hallway are on and off. When she arrived, the hallway was pitch black, and as soon as she stepped into the unit door, someone grabbed her neck. Bang! I bumped my back into the icy wall. You, return, dare, return, come. The male voice was lowered, enveloped in a strong tobacco smell, pausing word by word, as if wanting to gouge out her heart and feed the dog. Just leave without listening to his explanation. Dare to come back now. Song Miao smiled, her laughter tearing her heart and lungs. Her long legs thrust against the man's fragile spot, and cold and ruthless words overflowed from her teeth. Get lost. Without hesitation, she grabbed the man's arm with her slender hand, lifted her foot and kicked him in the thigh. After breaking free, she clenched her fist and hit the man's side face. Xing Shao's body became unstable when she punched him, and his back bumped into the handrail of the stairs. Song Miao took the opportunity and ran quickly upstairs. Xing Shao didn't expect the girl who used to hold his arm and act coquettishly to have such strength. He was unexpectedly punched by her, and the bloody smell on his lips reminded him. She has changed. She is no longer Song Miao from 8 years ago. She no longer belongs to him. Song Miao. 2 words overflowed between her teeth with a hazy white light, as if trying to peel her skin and cramp her. Song Miao rushed upstairs with all his might, frantically opening the door, but the key in his hand couldn't fit into the lock. The man's footsteps were getting closer and closer, and finally, the key was inserted into the lock. Click, she hurriedly entered the room and slammed the door shut. Her rapid breathing disrupted the tranquility inside the room, causing her to fall onto the carpet and hit the entrance cabinet with one hand, forcing herself to calm down. 8 years, why hasn't he let her go? Dong 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 dong, the knocking on the door interrupted her breathing and she trembled. Miao miao, miao miao, did you come back? The voice of Aunt Lin at the opposite door calmed Song Miao down. She got up, tidied up her hair, opened the door, and nodded gently. Aunt Lin, she said. Lin Qian nodded and handed her the key in her hand. You've been staying up late again these past few days. You've been throwing away the key. Song Miao took the key and thanked. I'm in a hurry to go to the bathroom, I forgot. Thank you, Aunt Lin. Thank you, didn't you eat? Auntie left you some food and came over to eat. Song Miao shook his head and politely refused. Thank you, Auntie. I've had it. Lin Qian nodded and advised, recently, a lot of things have been stolen from our community. Please be careful and go to bed early. Okay, Song Miao responded and watched her enter before closing the door. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. With Thorns Seeking recommended tickets. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. With Thorns Seeking recommended tickets. Song Miao slept at home for a whole day, and when she woke up, the scorching sun outside the window was spreading at the end of her bed. The stale smell from the old air conditioning made her frown slightly. She gradually regained consciousness when her thin hands touched the hot phone. Check out your phone and charge it, ignore all missed calls, get out of bed, wash up, and go out to buy cigarettes. She should consider living in a different city. She was stopped by the corner of her clothes before entering the supermarket across from the community. Song Miao. The male voice was gentle and didn't have much airs. Song Miao turned around somewhat surprised and said, Are you sullen? The deep and sullen black eyebrows slightly raised, and the scorching peach blossom eyes curved, showing a slight charm. What's up? Song Miao casually said politely. Without looking at him, he walked straight into the small supermarket, ordered a cigarette, and carefully took out cash in his pocket to prepare payment. Chen made the payment first. Song Miao tilted his gaze towards him, his gaze cold. With a sullen smile, knowing that she didn't like others meddling in her affairs, she only said, short-handed, big deal. Song Miao took out his cigarette case and lit one. He sat on the stump of the dead wutong tree at the door of the store. He put his long legs on the stump and his slender arms with cigarettes on his knees. What's going on? Think of an album and arrange for you, With his hands in his pockets and his head down, he stared at her, still feeling the same astonishment as when he first saw her. A head of silver hair was lazily and wearily rolled up, with amber fox eyes hidden under half-framed golden glasses, half-squinted, lazy and seemingly indifferent. But what's surprising is that her music style is arrogant, and every note is filled with the arrogance of, "Don't provoke me." She is like a knife with spikes. A knife inserted into your chest does not give you pleasure, but it brings pleasure to torment. This is her unique skill of Song Miao. Seduce you to her side, make you willingly kneel down for her, and then kick you away. Great sorrow and great joy. Let you never forget it for a lifetime. He never understood how there could be such contradictory individuals in the world, until, I saw her running away in the sky last night. He wants to give it a try and see if he can bring this heartless woman back. Call out. Song Miao took out his last puff of cigarette and casually threw away the cigarette butt, slowly crushing it with his toes. Do you want to survive? We must live on. She's right, why waste herself to make others happy? Get up, it's still cold. Chen Qi picked up someone and pushed her into the car. My friend has opened a new private restaurant, and I'll take you there. You live like a 50-year-old lady all day. Song Miao lifted his half-narrowed flirtatious eyes and looked at him with displeasure. 50-old lady, where are you so beautiful? Chen sulked and held down the car door to prevent her from hitting her head. He closed the door and sat back in the driver's seat before saying, but the old lady seems to live longer than you. Song Miao felt annoyed and leaned his head towards the car door, closing his eyes to sleep. Chen pressed the music button and placed a blanket on her lap. Song Miao suddenly opened his eyes, slightly tilted his head to gaze at him, and lowered his voice, "Don't touch me. TSK, the little girl from every family is covered in thorns." Song Miao looked at him. Go ahead, don't say anything." "You sleep," she said, feeling sullen as she handed her a bag of milk candy. Song Miao didn't answer. "Don't jump out of the car, I just bought it, you don't have the money to compensate," she pleaded softly as she slammed her foot on the gas pedal. Song Miao sneered and put his hand into his pocket to continue sleeping. The sullen light condensed on her, lightly curling her lips. Seeking a corner of security. The drowsy girl, who was dragging herself to sleep, got out of the car and forcefully pinched her shoulder, shaking her awake. Here we go, eat." Song Miao took a deep breath and glanced at his bald face, impatiently saying, "Big singer, do you want to be on the trending list? Follow you on the hot search, I can skip debunking and go eat." With a sullen smile, he didn't have any rules and looked very happy. Song Miao sneered lightly and lowered his duckbill cap. "The first time I saw someone who despised me like this, my interest became even stronger." End of this chapter. Chapter 4. You try, seeking recommended tickets. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. You try, seeking recommended tickets. This private restaurant has just opened for a while, and the boss is a loving couple. The landlady is a quiet and gentle girl with a fragrance of books all over her body. She looks like a girl in her 20s and 60s, but she is not familiar with worldly affairs. At this moment, there was no one in the shop. When Song Miao walked in with a sullen expression, the girl looked up and saw the two of them, lightly curling her lips and smiling softly. "Ah, Chen." His voice was gentle like the misty April rain in Jiangnan. "My sister. In law," she said obediently, nodding obediently as she restrained herself from being promiscuous and tugged at the hem of her clothes. The girl nodded, her gaze shifted to Song Miao, and a faint smile paused before quickly recovering. Your brother is checking the ingredients in the kitchen. Let's take friends to Langyuan. Chen nodded sullenly and pushed Song Miao towards the back garden. My sister-in-law is gentle. When my brother brought her home, my parents thought my brother was threatening them. Song Miao remained silent. This kind of girl looks like she has been loved for a lifetime, her every move is confident and firm, and she was nurtured by her elders who have exhausted their efforts. Different from her. Seeing that she was not in high spirits, Chen angrily pushed her towards the garden, and laughter shattered the tranquility. Song Miao glanced at him without hesitation and said, "It's noisy." The sullen and mischievous smile made Song Miao even more annoyed. The gentle woman was carrying a plate of desserts while leading the waiter to serve. She placed the dessert plate next to Song Miao's hand and smiled, saying, "Ah Shen said my rabbit was successful, and I'll give it to you." Song Miao looked at her, his eyes colliding with the soft and delicate light in her eyes, and he knew that the person in her mouth was the kind person she entrusted to her for life. This one is also considered successful. The calm and hoarse male voice followed behind the woman, with slightly black skin and cold and ruthless eyebrows and eyes. The man came out wearing a pink rabbit floral apron that didn't fit his figure very well. The calloused big hand knocked the celadone plate against Chen's hand, and his voice became impatient. "You eat." As he finished speaking, he grabbed the woman's shoulder strap and left the garden, muttering, "I'm going upstairs to rest. It's only been a few months, and I'm just wearing this little outfit." The woman smiled coquettishly and secretly kissed the man on the side of the garden corner, causing him to scold her. Song Miao smiled. The half-closed cold eyebrows and eyes shimmered with light. Seeing her smile, Chen sulked and turned to look at her disappearing figure, saying with a smile, "Listen to their stories. It's always exciting." Song Miao shook his head. She has no interest in prying into other people's privacy. With a sullen sigh, he pushed the vegetables towards her and poured a bowl of chicken soup for her, saying, "It's quite difficult to chase after you." Song Miao raised his thin eyelids slightly, looked at him, then lowered them and lightly curled the corner of his lips. "You give it a try," he said, feeling sullen and slightly stunned. "I caught a glimpse of the tall figure walking towards the garden, and my heart was clear. Let me give it a try." He reached out to trim her silver hair that had slipped from his ear, without paying any attention to the man on the bluestone road. Xing Shao's eyes suddenly shrank, his extremely black pupils overflowing with a fierce aura. "Ah Shao." Han Yin called him, gentle and shy. Xing Shao lowered his eyes, suppressing the cold light in his ink eyes. He grabbed the woman's waist and walked into the garden sofa chair. When passing by Song Miao, he didn't give her a glance. Song Miao paused his chopstick slightly, his drooping eyelashes blocking the grey silence in his eyes. Seeing that she was not in the right mood, Chen Qi picked up a chopstick of food and put it on her plate. With a smile, he said, "Are you going to play with my sister-in-law? The first time I see my family, she must have given you a red envelope." Song Miao closed his eyes, quickly opened them, and let out a sound. Xing Shao, who sat behind her, had a slight lag in his movements. The garden is quiet, and occasionally butterflies fly. The two tables of people eat quietly like this. Sitting with their backs facing each other, it seems like they are separated by a vast gap. When Chen Qi left with Song Miao, his hand firmly grasped her shoulder until he stepped up the stairs and finally released her. Song Miao took a deep breath and nodded at him, "Thank you." "You're welcome." With a sulky smile, "It's all here. Go upstairs and take a look at my little niece. She's so cute, her eyes are so big." Song Miao frowned deeply as he danced and described to her the little thing that had been living at the heart of his parents since birth, his eyes slightly relaxed. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Bullying, Seeking Recommendation Tickets. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Chapter 5 Bullying, Seeking Recommendation Tickets, Chen Only. Lan Jin placed the 8 or 9-month-old girl in Song Miao's arms and calmly went to make milk powder. Her father named her. Song Miao stood there holding the child in a daze, afraid to move and at a loss. With a sullen smile, she wanted to take it, but to her surprise, the little girl burst into tears and held on to Song Miao without letting go. She really likes you, Lan Jin said with a smile. Song Miao turned his gaze to the drooling baby in his arms, his expression softened. What should I do? She asked hoarsely, afraid that the smell of tobacco would smoke her, and immediately shut up. Lan Jin smiled, picked up the child and placed her on the sofa. She lay down to drink milk before looking at her with a smile. You and Ah Chen will come back more in the future, and Ah Shen will prepare many dishes, she said. Song Miao licked his slightly dry lips, feeling a bit cramped. Sister-in-law, you haven't caught me yet. Don't scare me away, he said with a slight curl of his lips. Lan Jin was slightly stunned, only nodding with a smile. In the afternoon, Song Miao took a break in the small building where she was staying, and when he brought her home, he forcefully locked her in the car. Song Miao was puzzled. You said I can give it a try, I'm serious. Song Miao nodded and said, open the door. Chen felt that she was perfunctory and sat in the driver's seat, lost in thought. I keep my word, Song Miao said coldly as he reached for the car door, his voice becoming impatient. Chen sulked and unlocked the central control lock, got off the car with her, stopped someone, grabbed her shoulder with both hands, lowered his head, and looked at her. Take a good rest. See you at the studio. She let out a sullen moan and waited for her to enter the dimly lit corridor before turning around and leaving. Upstairs. Song Miao twisted the door open and was grabbed by someone at the back of his neck, pressing his entire body onto the cabinet at the entrance. A hoarse voice wrapped in a strong tobacco smell slammed into her eardrums, as if wanting her life. Can you show me? As for. Song Miao supported the cabinet with both hands and chuckled softly. His smoky throat, which was enveloped in smoke, emitted a light sarcasm. Do you also deserve it? Xing Shao grabbed her chin and pulled her over to face him. Song Miao looked at him, and black and white images fell into his eyes, his gaze slightly dull. Suddenly, she thought of something and curled her lips lightly. You won't fall in love with me, will you? Love arises from hatred. Song Miao thought it was too funny and laughed out loud. My mom is your dad's little. Her cheeks were pinched, and the last word was forced to be swallowed. You don't deserve it. Bang, her door was knocked down. Song Miao fell to the floor and sat with a dull gaze. My thoughts were forced back many years ago. Summer. She had weekends, thinking it was Jingli's birthday, and planned to secretly go home to decorate her house. Pushing the door into the room, I saw women's clothes and men's leather shoes. The semi-open bedroom still emitted some sound she had never touched before. She was confused. Busy and disoriented, he ran downstairs and waited until it was dark before the man came down and left. She looked at the man's back and thought of her honest father, feeling a sudden resentment in her heart. She rushed upstairs and had an argument with Jingli, but in Jingli's mouth, she learned that her father had betrayed her first. All her beliefs in life have collapsed. Since that day, there have been constant rumors and gossip. Jincheng is too young, and in an instant, she became the target of bullying the whole school. Her heart was as dead as ashes. Until the winter solstice of that year, she tasted a hint of warmth as she was splashed with cold water in the restroom by several girls. He wrapped her in a thick coat and sent her home. Every time he was bullied afterwards, he would appear. Until New Year's Eve, he said, Song Miao, let's be together and take the imperial examination. She believes it to be true. A week before the college entrance examination, she was bullied again and hurt her eyes. I dare not tell him, but after he saw her home, I couldn't bear to let him go and wanted to hug him. On the dimly lit road, she followed behind him and listened to him say, "Song Miao is that kind of garbage. I'm just playing with her. Her mother forced my mother to death. Of course, I will slowly torture her and make her apologize for her." She froze in place. It turned out that the people who bullied her were all at his command. Her eyes turns out, she was being played with, it's ridiculous. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. You look wild, seeking recommendation tickets. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. You look wild, seeking recommendation tickets, dong 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 dong, the knocking on the door awakened Song Miao. She lifted her eyes, moved her already stiff arm, and got up to open the door. Little cutie. Breakfast hit her face, his sullen head tilted out from after breakfast, smiling at her. He didn't wear a mask, and his mischievous appearance looked hopeful. Song Miao took a step back, glanced behind him, opened the door, turned around, and walked slowly. "Big singer, you're really a pain in your spare time." A voice hoarse to dust, cold and heartless. Chen sulked and ignored her, kicked his shoes and closed the door. He went into the kitchen to look for a bowl and rummaged around complaining, "Song Miao, are you human? There's nothing at home." "I'm completely colorblind," Song Miao said casually as he entered the bathroom to wash up. "You're all black and white, I can't distinguish between them. What's the use of it?" Feeling sullen and slightly stunned, Song Miao washed himself clean and came out wearing a suspender skirt. His silver hair fell on his collarbone, cold and beautiful. Seeing him stunned, he opened his own door and said, "Please." Chen put down his breakfast and rolled his eyes. "Close it, what do you wear? A man doesn't have good things." Song Miao slammed the door and had breakfast quietly. Chen sulked and occasionally glanced at her, trying not to speak. Song Miao was annoyed by his sight and looked up at him with a heavy gaze, "Ask. When did it happen? It's none of your business." She just wants to find a vent. The producer will arrive at 10 o'clock, and it's the one I use. I met briefly last time and we'll have a good chat later. Song Miao ignored and lowered his head to eat. Caney Records. When Song Miao entered the piano room, he ran into Xing Shao sitting behind the round table. His footsteps slowed down slightly, but he quickly recovered and followed Chen into the round table. "Zhou Gu." She nodded at Zhou Shi, her gaze not diverted to Xing Shao for a moment. Zhou Cei nodded and handed her a glass of white water. "Gu Yong's response was better than I expected, so I want to work with you again. You understand what Chen Qi wants, so there shouldn't be any problem with your cooperation. His concert is scheduled for August, 5 months, 2 songs. Can we release them? Specific requirements." Song Miao lowered his head and drank water. In summer, little girls are all wild. Write about the freedom they yearn for in their hearts. You look quite wild, but you are also quite stubborn. Let Chen Qi take you to play. He's rumored. Song Miao felt somewhat disgusted. "I'll give you the money from the scandal," Zhou Zixiao said. "The sullen traffic has caused you a lot of trouble, and you're not at a loss." Song Miao raised his eyebrows lightly, "Not necessarily." Zhou Kai smiled and understood her arrogance a bit. He pushed her towards the electronic keyboard and said, "Okay, then I'll hurt you, Miss Muse." Bang! Xing Shao's water cup fell to the ground and water spilled all over the floor. Zhou Kai glanced at him and clicked, "Grandpa, do you know how much money I have for this qin? Get out." Xing Shao sneered and kicked onto the military drum, then turned around and walked out. Zhou was stunned for a second. What illness did this old man have today? Song Miao didn't tilt his head and sat down to play the piano. Zhou Cei dragged a chair and sat down, cursing Xing Shao, "This old man seems to be sick these days, not from our company. He comes every day, and Han Yin's broken throat is worth him running every day. He's sick and blind." Song Miao touched the headphone strap and ignored it. Zhou sure. Chen Chen patted Zhou Cha's shoulder and lifted his chin outward. Zhou Tsing walked out of the piano room with him and complained, "Do you have to use her? You're not afraid of her suddenly disappearing? I think she's a bit irresponsible and casual. What if she runs away halfway? Just grab it after running." Chen Chen leaned against the wall and said with a smile, "Besides, she's not cowardly." Zhou raised his eyebrows and didn't understand what he was saying. With a sullen smile, he entered the piano room to play with Song Miao. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Be careful, I'll sew my mouth on for you, request recommendation ticket. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Be careful, I'll sew my mouth on for you, request recommendation ticket. When Song Miao was going out of the piano room to pour water and drink, he happened to see Han Yin recording songs in the recording studio. Her agent saw her and caught up to stop her. Muse. Song Miao lowered his head and handed her the business card, then turned his head to look at the woman. The conditions are so good, think about it. Song Miao remained silent for a moment, then his slender fingers pinched the business card into his pocket and said, "Thank you, Sister Zhou." "Leave me a phone number," Zhou Xiandao said. "If I have a job to find you, it's all about earning money, not doing anything." Song Miao pondered for a few seconds and read his phone number. As Lu Yin said, having multiple friends leads to multiple paths. She doesn't need to struggle with money. Zhou Xianxuan gave her phone number, nodded, and left. Song Miao nodded and went to the tea room. When I returned, I caught a glimpse of a man standing outside the recording studio, leaning against a railing and making phone calls. The man has sharp facial features, a tight jawline, and a sharp Adam's apple sliding with his thin lips, which is more calm and cold than when he was 17 or 18. Song Miao breathed a deep breath, pointed his fingers off the golden glasses on the bridge of his nose, gently rubbed the center of his eyebrows, and slowly crossed over the man. Suddenly, her arm was grabbed and her back collided with the railing. Her hands were scalded with hot water to the back of her fair hands, instantly turning red. "How are you going to play with Chen Chen? What, do you want to add one?" His tone was light and sarcastic. "If the price is reasonable, I can do it too," said Mr. Xing, as he climbed onto the man's shirt with his slender fingers and with a slightly cool fingertip, he opened a shiny round button. The long and hoarse ending exudes a myriad of emotions, captivating the soul. Xing Shao waved away her hand in disgust and strode in the opposite direction. Song Miao casually shook his hand and walked towards the piano room expressionless. Piano room. Chen Chen saw that her hand was scalded, so he clicked and flipped through his box. After finding the burn ointment, he pulled her hand and applied it to her. "You're so awesome, can you even scald yourself with hot water? What about self-harm? Are you a man? You have everything." Song Miao glanced at the ointment in his hand with a hint of disgust. "What's so important about minor injuries? A single strand of hair on my leg is even more valuable than yours, okay?" Chen angrily retorted, his subordinates being both light and serious. Song Miao looked at him. Okay, you're precious, you're precious." Chen Chen lowered her head and blew on her hand, then turned around to find a piece of paper to wipe her hand. Song Miao condensed his back and lowered her gaze to see the slightly darkness on her hand. After a moment, she turned around and continued to think about composing music. After wiping her hands, Chen Chen saw her cold and pondering, secretly touching her hooked lips and bending down. He blew a breath in her ear and said with a smile, "Cute, Summer, there's no need to commit suicide. Let's go, we can come up with some nonsense here." He picked her up and casually threw her a pair of sunglasses. "Put them on, I'll teach you what to do in the summer," he said. "Kick the door and run upstairs quickly." Song Miao was held by him and ran up to the top floor of Caney with integrity. "Song Miao, let me tell you, summer is the most beautiful time for girls, with scorching sun, sweat, flowers, and passionate emotions. He grabbed her shoulder and slid his big hand in front of her. Take a serious look, your world of light and dark is incredibly good. Don't live and die all day long. A man's love is like a sunset, just forget it in the early morning. Song Miao let out a smile and turned his gaze to him, feeling that he was sick. He patted off his shoulder and turned to walk downstairs. I don't understand these things, I can write songs. This thing is called talent. Chen sulked and grabbed the back of her neck, pulling the person back. He lowered his head and approached her. Miss Talent, aren't we going to play together? He rushed forward, trying to leave her with deeper memories. Song Miao took a step back and kicked him in the thigh, causing his body to become unstable. He fell and his palms scraped against his skin. Grass, it really hurts. Song Miao let out a soft snort and crouched down with his knees propped up. He pinched his chin with his delicate white fingertips and lifted it up. Brother, a strong kiss. She chuckled, her lips curled to one side, and her voice was extremely cold. Be careful, I'll sew your mouth on, she said. End of this chapter. Chapter 8, Did you say, seeking recommendation tickets? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8, Did you say, seeking recommendation tickets? With a sullen and mischievous smile, she lowered her head and pecked at her fingertips before quickly jumping up and running downstairs. It's the same everywhere, sister, she said. Song Miao stood still, his thumb rolling over the temperature on his index finger, and his nails deeply pinching the shallow scars on his knuckles. My vision is hazy. Song Miao, wherever you kiss, you're always a kiss. You're mine, for the rest of your life. The arrogant and beaten boy held on to her hand in physics class, smiling with warmth in his eyes and brows. She sat down on the ground and took out a cigarette box, lighting each cigarette one by one. A box of cigarettes was gone, and she slapped herself, fanning away the tear on her cheek. What kind of lowliness do you commit? Chen was pulled by Song Miao to the underground boxing club in Jincheng when he realized how wild this woman was. Be so wild that you don't treat yourself like a person, and your moves are not deadly. When holding a 10,000 bonus and inviting everyone to strip the skewers to drink beer at the barbecue booth, I felt sulky and only felt that the woman was crazy. After finally carrying her home, the woman stuck up like a fairy. She hung his neck with a seductive gaze and said, Didn't you want me? Give you a chance. I'm not a duck, she said as she swallowed heavily and pulled down her arm, carrying her back to bed. Duck. Song Miao's mind was slightly stagnant, drunk and confused, and he remained silent. Chen sulked and helped her lie down. The woman started to make a fuss, struggling and throwing up a heavy and angry body. With a frown on his face, he pushed the person back to bed and turned to take off his clothes. When Song Miao woke up, there was a shirtless man lying on the bedding beside him. She pinched her eyebrows and turned her gaze to the tired person beside her, giving herself a thumbs up. Song Miao, you are really amazing. Sleeping with my national husband. She quickly opened the drawer, pulled out her diary, and began writing. March 7th, sunny, slept heavily, sleeping with your mother. Chen was awakened by her and stood up to see what she had written, not angry to death. How could I have thought of chasing you, drinking and messing around all night, going to buy breakfast for me, exhausted to death. Song Miao sneered, closed his diary, and casually threw it away. He got out of bed and took a shower. Bang, when the door closed, Chen Qi slammed back onto the bed. When Song Miao arrives home with Xiaolongbao, Lu Yin, who is angry, leans against her door and plays with her mobile phone. Seeing her coming back, he raises his hand and knocks on the door, go in and talk. Crunching, the door was pulled open. The drowsy man was slightly stunned, and the person outside was also slightly stunned. Song Miao strode over, pushed the person in, glanced at the towel around his waist, frowned slightly, and said, go in. Lu Yin chuckled and kicked her shoes as she entered the door, circling her arms and looking at the two of them. Her gaze shifted to Song Miao and she said, "Do you have a way out, don't you tell me? He didn't give you the contract." Song Miao casually put down breakfast to make coffee for himself. "Why don't you threaten him while you see it, and even raise the price? Do you have face? 2 songs, I'll give you 4,000 words, you're missing." Chen Qi snatched the black coffee from her hand and took a quick sip. His brows furrowed and he stretched out for a moment before looking at Lu Yin. "My agent will contact you for the contract. It's just a normal colleague relationship. This dog is spitting at me all over." He rubbed Song Miao's silver hair and said, "Do you think it's cute?" Song Miao looked at him, grabbed his own cup, and threw it into the trash can. Feeling sullen and indifferent, he stretched lazily and ordered, "Get me a set of clothes, wash that one for me." "I didn't give you face," Song Miao said coldly as he grabbed his shoulder and threw someone over the shoulder towards the door. "Drink her coffee from her cup." With a sullen expression, he rubbed his back and let out a hissing sound. Looking at his red elbow, his black and shiny eyes were filled with dampness. "Wei Chu Baba," said Song Miao. Song Miao pinched his eyebrows, annoyed by him, turned around and entered the room, slamming the door. End of this chapter. Did I make a mistake in Chapter 9 seeking recommended tickets? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Did I make a mistake in Chapter 9 seeking recommended tickets? Lu Yin gave him a sympathetic glance, helped him up, and smiled sincerely. "Brother Chen, do you want to sign a long-term contract?" His coquettish voice seemed to be preparing to drown the person in front of him. With a sullen and disdainful sneer, he lifted his step and walked towards the restaurant. When Song Miao came out, he saw the man still wearing his upper body bare. He went back to the room and grabbed a super-large BF-style hoodie, smashing it on his head. "There's not much flesh, show off your butt," he said after speaking. She sat across from him and lit a cigarette. She stepped on the chair with her right leg, rested her arm on her knee, and the cigarette from her fingertips lightly tapped against the ashtray, feeling extremely impatient. She put on her sweater and slowly bit Xiaolongbao. "He won't leave." Angry to death. Suddenly, Song Miao snatched the chopsticks from his hand and threw them into the trash can. "Get lost." With a gentle sound. "She has run out of patience." Don't. Lu Yin ran over to calm things down. Coincidentally, when it comes to harmony, those 3 can only. "I can't." Chen refused directly. "I have a fixed harmony teacher, unless." He looked at Song Miao and lifted his chin. "Please beg me." Song Miao held a cigarette in his mouth and stared at him until the sparks burned to his lips before saying, "Please, big singer. The tone is not good enough. Sink and groan, bow and drink kanji." Chen was kicked downstairs by Song Miao. He grabbed her arm while she turned around and pulled her into his arms. He hugged her tightly and jumped into his car before she got angry, flying away. While Song Miao was still in a daze, he was pulled to the dark by his big hand and pushed against the cold corner. "You keep him overnight at your house." The fierce force hitting her eardrums, as if preparing to devour her alive. Song Miao raised his delicate and seductive little face, lightly curling his lips. "Should I give you a number? Do you like that day?" "Mr. Xing," she draped her arm over his wide shoulder and leaned against him, saying, "How was it today?" "Mr. Xing," Song Miao's lips were bitten, and a faint smell of blood filled his lips. Song Miao smiled nonchalantly, extremely insincere. Xing Shao disliked her appearance the most. He grabbed her slender waist and pushed her up along the slightly protruding bone beads on her back, gripping her neck and vigorously rubbing her into his arms. She was too far away from him, so far away that it seemed like they were just strangers. Suddenly, the slight pain on the tip of his tongue brought Xing Shao back to his senses. Song Miao suddenly pushed him away, rubbing his thumb against his slightly bloodshot lips and sneering, if Mr. Xing wants to play, I'll be with him until the end. Ah, Miao. Xing Shao grabbed her and bent down to hug her, hastily explaining, "Ah, Miao, I'm sorry. It was my fault back then. I'm sorry, please forgive me, okay? It's me, bastard. I shouldn't have done those things to you. I'm sorry, don't anger me with Qin Chi, okay? Haha." Song Miao raised his arms to separate the two of them, his chin gently raised, and asked aggressively, "Am I wrong? Xing Shao, am I wrong?" For 8 years, she kept asking herself where she was wrong, and he wanted to see her as a target of revenge. Is it just because she is Jing Li's daughter? Being splashed with cold water in winter, being blocked in the toilet to pick up clothes, being grabbed and pressed into the water filled with paint, is it all because she is Jing Li's daughter? Why should she take responsibility for her damn mistake? Xing Shao saw the despair in the girl's eyes, his heart trembled, and his consciousness relaxed. Past events weigh heavily on his heart like 1,000 pounds of stones. Song Miao took a step back and walked past him in the wrong direction, his gaze not shifting to him for a moment. She stopped on the dimly lit staircase, turned sideways, and looked down at him with a hollow voice. "Master Xing, remember, I hate you even more than you think," she said. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. He lost her, seeking recommendation ticket. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. He lost her, seeking recommendation ticket. Song Miao and Chen Chen went to another place to collect music. An ancient village that has not yet been developed, with simple and honest people, and the weather in March and April already has a strong spring atmosphere. Song Miao sat on a stone halfway up the slope, with his arms propped up and his head raised to bask in the sun. The wind in the mountains blew the skirt, and the silver hair was tied into a tangled fried dough twists braid on the chest. 2 light blue flowers were also inserted between the slightly shiny hair. Proud and frustrated. She felt extremely ugly. "Hey, what's going on with you and Xing Shao? I heard from Grandma Miao that there's a big boss living next door who spends a lot of money renting for a year." Feeling sullen, he played with his hand and asked back, with curiosity in his eyes. "It's none of your business," Song Miao lazily scolded him. Click wipe, Chen took a photo and sat next to her, pointing to the screen and saying, "Look, it's so beautiful." Song Miao lowered his head to look at the intertwined photo, but there was no response. In a completely black picture, there is a white ghost-like shadow that looks very scary. What's so beautiful about it? Suddenly, a slight warmth came from my cheeks. Song Miao was stunned. "You're looking for death again." She glared fiercely at him and kicked him in the leg. Chen sulked and raised his eyebrows to smile, greatly lacking in beating. Far away. The man standing by the window tightly clenched his binoculars, his knuckles turning white and overflowing with coldness. At noon, Chen Chen was weaving a wreath for Song Miao on the mountain. Just halfway through, he received a call from his agent asking him to quickly return to Jincheng, saying that there was a partner who wanted to see him. He looked at Song Miao and wanted to refuse. Song Miao brushed his hand before he agreed. After settling in the girl, he drove away. Song Miao waited for his car to walk away and lay in the rattan chair outside the farmyard, holding a sound harvester, listening to the wind. The banana leaves covered the scorching sun and landed a few strands on her round toes. Beauty is like a painting, and lazy and tired. She rarely relaxes, she sleeps soundly. She didn't wake up when Xing Shao put a blanket on her lap. He squatted beside her legs, gazing at her sleeping face. He lifted his hand and stopped on her side, afraid to touch her. She's right, she's not wrong. He was sick and would vent all the anger of his mother's death on her, ruining her best age. Miao Miao, it's time for dinner. Grandma Nyo's loving voice came from the courtyard. Ah. Song Miao responded vaguely, lifted his eyes, and looked around in confusion. After regaining consciousness, he saw the expensive blanket on his leg and sneered lightly. Picking up the blanket and casually throwing it away, he picked up the slightly heated sound collector and left the rattan chair. "Grandma Miao, do I want to eat spicy food?" A coquettish and pretty female voice was spreading coquettishness. Xing Shao hadn't heard this sound for 8 years and stood in a daze in the gap behind the banana tree. My thoughts were pulled back to my sophomore year in high school. He learned that his mother was carrying a knife to find Jingli, fearing that she might have an accident and rush out to stop her. In the deserted CAFA, my mother confronted the seductive woman, who had been well raised since childhood and couldn't resist her shameless words. She rushed out of the CAFA and headed straight for the speeding truck. At that moment, he felt the sky collapse. In the pool of blood, he held on to Xiao Jinan's body and burst into tears. With tears in his eyes, he caught a glimpse of her. She obediently followed the seductive woman and received training, looking very easy to bully. So, he hated her. She looks enchanting, but pure as a blank sheet of paper. He found a gangster in Jincheng to spread the news about her mother, causing her to fall into dire straits. And then, heroes save beauty. At first, destroy her and seek revenge for her mother. His plan was flawless, even choosing the time to abandon her. But, slowly, he found her so clean that he dared not destroy her again. On the night before the college entrance examination, he took her home, but he didn't expect the obedient girl to follow him. I heard his hatred towards her. What he wants to explain to her is that he no longer hates her and wants to be with her well. But she disappeared. For 8 whole years, there was no trace. He lost her. He lost the girl who was clinging to him but didn't dare to disturb him at any time. "Grandma Miao, Xiaohua has given birth to a baby. Can I bring one back to raise?" A soft voice pulled back Xing Shao's thoughts, and he moved his stiff neck to gaze at the girl in the courtyard who was chatting and laughing with the elderly. She smiled so happily, just like he used to tease her casually. End of this chapter.